charger she has this morning. It's upside down, or?
I thought I brought the agenda, but I know what it is. I think are there any objections to the meeting minutes? Any corrections, revisions? Can we approve them? By motion to approve?
We're gonna approve them to send them to the board to approve.
Yes, we're just approving them for, we can't approve anything. So do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Austin is coming, right?
Yes, he's on phone.
Okay. He knows all of this, so I won't have to.
You're good. Keep going.
Bring it
Just
ahead.
double check my camera.
This, you've seen most of this, the spreadsheet before. Josh, do you want to kind of tell them what's been updated as far as the dates and where you plan on going with this as far as the GIS and so forth? So how we're going to integrate it into the BPW's regular work plan, I guess.
Absolutely. We've been updating the elevation data, as you guys are all, as everyone here is aware.
Mark, would you pin me? I'm sorry.
On each one of the assets. What we've been doing is we have been collecting data for some time now, elevation and long on each one of these assets. The assets have been right now they're pretty high level of what we've collected, but as we work on as we improve our infrastructure, those assets we're adding far more detail to this information. That being said, we take that data, we incorporate it into our GIS, and that data allows us to give a graphical representation. Sorry, I'm going high level of all of those assets.
That's a pretty savvy thing.
Yeah.
You're not talking about that.
No. Oh no. Anyways, we take the as-built from each of the projects, and then we've been incorporating that into our GIS. Those assets, in addition to maintaining that data, elevation, lat and long, each one of the individual subsections of each asset, that gets logged in our GIS or program, which currently is Esri. And in addition to that, we're also tying that in the very near future into our accounting software for forecasting for accounting perspectives. That is on our roadmap, and we're eager to do that, but it is a large project, and it's just opening up something that a service that we don't have yet, but they do provide. And we look to utilize that to provide data to the board and to executive decision makers on how we want to move forward with improvements. That being said, we've incorporated some small changes since the previous meeting. Is that the proposed compliance timeline correlates to the flood zone. We have tied that into our GIS system.
Bless you.
That will allow us to query that data as needed, and we can then reference that data as the decision maker. I keep referring to decision makers because I don't do that.
So for example, basically pump station 4 there.
Mhm.
As a result of, or maybe you knew or didn't know, you've said, okay, now 2030 is kind of when it gets to be important based on projections of sea level rise and things like that.
Correct.
And the one above it, you got 10 more years to worry about, roughly.
Those are those numbers are, to my interpretation are their suggestions for us to start really focusing on. It just allows you guys to say, hey, we should probably think about this sooner than later.
Of course, if there's upgrades occurring for other reasons,
Sure.
it would be built to the proposed
Correct.
elevations. In fact, Austin's already starting to do this. Some projects that are coming up, so we're seeing this already happen. But you know, we haven't gone back through this and looked at each one very specifically, as so many haven't, and
Yeah, I mean,
we adjusted it to maybe 2032 or anything. We haven't gotten that finite. These are just red flags that will be coming up
right.
at periods of time. So we're going to try to have them come up in 2030 and say, hey, don't forget these.
You might have a pump that's bad. And
Oh yeah,
needs to be.
there's several pumping stations, and when Austin gets here, he has some really interesting news that relates to that. So,
But in some ways, just it's better than I would have guessed.
well, I keep thinking of, you know, if we're talking about, you know, like 2 feet in, you know, 2050, something like that. Well, I guess I just think of it as a sliding scale, and each year your probabilities just get a little higher, and this is just the way it works out.
What's the significance of the red typeface?
The red type are critical assets.
Okay,
These are, so again, these we should certainly take priority over the black type.
okay.
Although everyone is very important,
Yeah,
please don't discount that. We just, 3 and 4 are just, 3, 4, and 8 are really our heartbeat for our wastewater pumping stations. Obviously in each one of the plants and the towers are obviously key infrastructure. I will say the electric substation, kind of a side note, extremely difficult to get GIS data on because of the electrical interference. That was so we had to guesstimate based on topography as close to LiDAR. We were using LiDARs as close as we could, and we based off of the high level and the low level, and then we had pads at each one of the sites, and we took physical measurements off of. Unfortunately, as long as there's electricity flowing through that facility, I did the best I could.
Well, we're going to be coming up for a complete town outage in the spring, so. So good news.
Oh, well, I will say though, that to that end, we do exercise every opportunity in-house. Whenever we have open infrastructure, open holes, we do. Myself, I have actually jumped down into holes to shoot elevation points on, on pipes and whatever's open. So we do take every opportunity we can.
Yeah, and just for his phrase, referring to is that the realignment of Clay Orchard, Old Orchard and Savannah,
Yeah,
there's a power line that has to come down. And they notified us that we will have to take about 8-hour outage in town. It was supposed to happen this year, but now it looks like DelDOT is pushing it off till next year. But that's what I was referring to.
Mhm.
So
One thing we
Don't do it right before the election.
yes, we're gonna do.
I think he comes up next year. So you
yeah.
My picture will be with a shotgun. Oh, it's recorded, I'm sorry.
some people might be watching too. Yeah,
The list is right in front of you on that. If there is any.
attendees 0. Okay, we should put up. There he is.
Sorry.
How are you?
Not too bad.
Good morning.
For those that miss it live, we will be
Started.
posting on our YouTube page for.
We didn't say anything that you didn't already know or
No, you're fine.
have input. But one thing we should add to this list is how many transformers.
Mhm.
I assume that most of those are in A7, I down there. But we'd have to check them, but we should add them this thing, because that's something that's going to be impacted. And it's interesting, you go down the list of AE7 and you see, places where probably shouldn't surprise us, but aren't on the beach. Hornkill I see right away, and Harbor View, places like that I think of the beach all the time. So there's
Yeah.
other areas that we have to be careful of too, because they're very low lying. So
Is Donovan Smith in this?
okay.
I haven't collected those as-built as of yet.
Well, there's going to be much of that stuff's going to be rebuilt. So
Yeah, the back closer to Ebenezer Branch is within the flood zone.
And the electrical distribution though is
All over
theirs.
it.
It's not ours. They're single metered, so. It's still a concern, but it's not ours.
Not.
all the transformers are up
All of our transformers are up.
there.
Mhm.
So I mean, this is where we're going. The documents, we're still adding data to them. Yes.
Oh, significantly.
This is a big operation to tie this all into the GIS, and then at some point, that's not in there yet, but it's going to be tied into it when we get everything lined up. There's still a lot of work to do before we're finished. But I was saying that we're already implementing these. Then you have a pumping station you were working on that you're going to be using the new standards we were just discussing from this past week.
Yeah, so we're working with the University of Delaware to go after a grant for planning purposes for all the pump stations that are in the floodplain. And then we're going to implement these standards when it comes to the flood-proof doors, when it comes to all the electrical, getting out of the wet well and putting it into an electrical cabinet. So right now we're hopefully submitting that either Thursday or Friday of this week and hopefully get funded. And then our goal is to do the work in the next probably 5-6 months and then submit for a follow-up grant. This one is actually 90-10 funded, so we pay for 10%. And then hopefully when it's all said and done and we go after the funding kind of in the December-November timeframe, we're hoping to get at least 75-25 split. Hopefully there's a chance we get 90-10, but that would essentially take care of all the pump stations that are in the floodplain. I'm looking at mitigation measures, bypass capability, backup generation, bypass. Oh my God, what am I doing? Bypass pumps themselves.
Mhm.
So we're actively working to see what we can come up with.
Is that to study it or to do the work?
Both. So the first part, which is what we're going after now, is actually hurricane funds from the hurricane that happened down in Florida. That money got allocated to each state. Right now, Delaware has about $1 million, and nobody has went after any of it. So originally we were going to go and try and almost do the design build, but they felt that we would have a better chance if we went after funding to do a deep dive analysis at each one, from an electrical study to backup, like mitigation measures on floodproofing the hashes, like on California, that's usually underwater. So we're going to go after that piece first. It's what we're thinking is about 250,000. So we would be about 25,000 into it. And then that will give us very good footing as we go for future mitigation money, hopefully the end of this year.
And that future money comes from, what's the source of that one?
So they allocated it. I have to
Oh,
go
it's
back
the
and look
same,
at,
it's the same, okay, it's
but with
it's not
the,
bills or,
well, I think they're going to tie it with bills. So I think there's going to be additional funding that's coming through, which is the reason why they think that there could be a chance for 90-10 funding on that as well.
And this is really exciting because we didn't realize it was going to be that soon. The money's there.
Yeah.
We're going to be moving. It's going to be interesting. And we have to see how we're going to do this. Is that, we're talking about raising some of these things a couple feet.
Yeah.
And some of them are people's front yards. So I'm sure there's going to be concerns there about how we do that and make it aesthetically acceptable.
Yeah, right. Pretty them up somehow.
Or maybe you can make them so they could be easily adjusted up in a few years, if they're not.
so I'm not,
Welcome. It's quiet.
Is that funny?
That's because you weren't.
We
here.
heard the elevator. We always stop talking. Sorry, I'm late. I've got.
We're getting along.
Everything going on at home.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, one other question is this helpful? I mean, we sort of pushed you into it, I think.
Is it helpful? Yeah. And I think we've come a long
Very
way.
Interesting and, as I said earlier, better than I would expect.
Do you have another one of these? I can take this one down.
I have a question about this whenever. I looked at this. This is lovely. I was trying to do this on my phone the other day. Datum for the elevations is what? Okay, so
Is what?
having some familiar,
It's
so
88,
it's
okay.
it's the basis, the 0 point for a surveyor to figure out how high
Yeah.
above all of these existing elevation numbers are calculated. And so not understanding the construction here, and having some familiarity with a couple of these points. The 11 California Avenue site, for example, says the bottom of the cabin is 9.3 feet. The ground level there is 5.
Probably. Yeah, no, maybe. Well, yeah, about that 5 to 6, I would say.
Well, I mean, so because now the 88, I believe, is close to mean sea level. They're
Yes.
less than a half a foot apart.
They are.
So I just don't understand why these numbers are so high. And I'm wondering if that number's high, if all of them are high.
Then the data that we've pulled, they,
I mean, I'm assuming these things
So
are
the-
underground.
No,
Yes,
that's
I see.
not.
no,
Oh.
so the cabinet is not.
No.
This is where the controls are.
Yeah, the controls are,
Okay,
so
so
it's
that's
an
actually
elevated
above ground.
cabinet, yes.
Okay, fine.
So
I thought it was underground. That's why.
everything that is in the ground is potentially, well, it should be submersible pretty much.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what we're upgrading. Yeah.
It should be.
There are junction boxes up there. with the-
Yeah.
Okay, so you're
Yeah.
talking about the electricals. The
Yes,
cabinet
all
is
of
the
that is-
electrical stuff. Okay, sorry.
They're in the little cedar huts next to.
All right, fine. That takes care of it. Thank you.
But why don't you just go over what you just talked about, the funding, because he did miss that, and that's very important.
So we're going after, the UD is offering a program that allows municipalities that don't necessarily have grant writers on staff to utilize their services. So we've been working with Chase and the UD now for probably 3 months. And what we originally thought we were going to do is almost like a design build to go through each one of these pump stations and do some of these improvements. What we decided to do, we kind of pivoted last week when we brought GMB in, because we were originally just doing it with Kim and myself and Robin. We're going to go after about $250,000 for a planning study, essentially, of every pump station that's deemed in the flood zone. If they do not have components that are out of this meeting where they need to be, based off our standards that we discuss here, then our goal would be to incorporate that as part of that design piece. And then in the future, hopefully within the next 5 or 6 months, we would actually submit for additional funding, which would take what we have on paper and have a contractor start implementing those. So this would be attributed to anything that's in the floodplain pump station wise. That includes bypass valving. That includes moving junction boxes outside of the wet well and into an actual
Electrical
cabinet.
junction box.
Yes.
Okay.
Because there are some that are in the wet well. And we know that California, for example, floods all the time. It's one of the hot topic areas.
That's why I raised it.
You said that construction, we actually have to design first.
Yes,
So the first is just planning.
correct.
And the second one is really design and implementation. Is that-
Yep.
So that's exciting news, because we didn't realize that money was available, and we can start doing things much earlier than we thought on this schedule.
It's a 90-10 opportunity. So we post 10, the federal government does the other 90, and then hopefully they said the benchmark's about 75-25 on the actual construction piece, but they're hopeful that through the IRA and the BIL that they may pump that to like a 90-10 on the construction side.
The only other thing to be aware of on this, and I think I'm correct, the flood zone. This is the existing flood zone without sea level rise.
Yes.
Correct.
So
That was one of the several
Every-
questions that's stacking. up right now.
everything that is X is potentially in the flood zone when they ever get to update the flood maps.
Right, so the question that comes to mind is, uh, what time frame does this stuff have to work before you're upgrading it the next time around?
Well-
We were talking about the sewer plant for a while. These things are smaller items, but I'm assuming ultimately you don't want to have to keep.
This is 2050. for sure.
2050. All right,
Yeah, but, and there's no way we could do them all at once anyway.
Right.
So the highest priority ones are the ones that are in the current flood zone.
Yeah.
But we shouldn't lull ourselves into believing that everything else is honky dory, that it's up 15 feet in the air and
Well,
Go ahead.
I was gonna say that we do, as the feds update in the state and all of the flood zones are updated, we'll update this and then we'll revisit this again. So that way you guys can have as most current, data to choose or operate from.
the federal money, the opportunity you guys just described, is that strictly for water sewer type stuff? Because I know you guys have talked off and on about MS4. Are there opportunities while you're doing that to be considering that structure, that infrastructure, which is out there as well?
No,
I know it complicates things.
I
MS4 is the stormwater.
I think you can. It's just a matter of what are the capabilities of the staff that we have and trying to tackle. Like, to do this project alone is a big feat. I mean, to do this study in 6 months and then start to go to construction on top of trying to go after money for MS4.
Well, we don't even know what MS4 is yet.
right, as I say, and since we're not even designated as an MS4 and we don't know what the requirements would be, it seems like it, as much of a concern as it is, and we know because of our outfalls, we'd be throwing a dart at the wall.
Okay.
But
I mean, I've heard you talk about it several times, so I thought maybe there was
Yeah.
a more
Yeah, well,
pressing need to figure this out. That's why I asked.
so
it
these
keeps
funds,
getting pushed. They originally, I think, when I had talked with them, they were thinking it was going to be implemented in the 2022 timeframe, 2023. But I think COVID and everything else and politics kind of pushed that on the way burner.
it's a 2020 census is what it was going to be tied to originally.
Yes, that's right.
The money that we're going after is all hurricane funds that came through the states, about $1 million, and nobody has gone after any of it. We would be the first ones. But we have to submit by Friday, I believe. Friday end of day.
So does everybody else?
Yeah.
Sounds like Roger was good.
Yeah.
Fingers are crossed.
So,
There's a lot of other municipalities sitting around the table right now like we are.
Yeah, right.
Something we also mentioned that Josh is putting us all together. He's working with Robin. He's our IT guy. I don't know whether you've met before, but
Yeah, we've talked a little bit. He's the GIS man.
Yeah.
right. And that's
I'm-
the next step. This isn't in GIS yet. Once he gets everything done, we're gonna tie that into the GIS, so all that information's right there at our fingertips.
A lot of this data, we do have a fair amount of this data in GIS. It's just tying it to our accounting system for financial forecasting. That's what we're looking, that's our that's an Austin question. I guess I'm assuming within 5 years, it's kind of our goal to tie the mapping into
County system.
our NIC for financial planning.
How are you tying it in there?
The mapping feature that NIC offers that we're not currently utilizing.
Yes. We do not.
It does tie directly with Esri, and then we'll be able to query that data, this data, out of our Esri product to pull it into the accounting for dollars and cents.
Mhm.
Now, we were gonna pause this committee waiting for the city to catch up with the things they've got to do, with the building codes and so forth. I mean, we can move along with what doesn't involve them, but to do this study completely, we have to tie in with them in the building code. But maybe now that this money may be coming, maybe we can have maybe occasional meetings to bring you up to speed on what's happening and when these things are going to be going. So we'll just call them as there's information that would be important to this committee.
Along the lines of the money, so I know the grant has to be submitted by this Friday. Did they give it an award time frame?
Yeah, hopefully they're hopeful that it's like a couple weeks to a month.
Then yeah, once the middle, it ought to be easy.
Yeah. Now the city went after funding for Blockhouse Pond, but I believe they didn't get it. Not totally separate funding source. So they used the UD and tried to go after it, but this hopefully will be favorable for us.
What did they try to do with Blockhouse Pond?
It was a stormwater piece. I don't know if it was a study. I'm not quite sure, but I know they were going after that.
It was after last year's issue with the
The drought.
levels, the algae growth,
This is for us, this is big because usually when we go for any sort of funding, we our MHI is so high. So the only thing we get is like if it has anything to do with low income, like Donovan Smith or Capes Cove, for example, there's benefits out there. But in a typical circumstance, like when we're going after water tower funds, they don't just come back and say, oh, here's $1 million. And a lot of it's tied because when you look at the financial impact, so when you take on that debt and how you service that debt, how it impacts your customers, because the MHI in Lewes is so high, they don't necessarily just start dishing out subsidy.
Well, of course, some of these areas are going to be as high value as you're going to find.
Which is why we're going after the mitigation piece. Because I think there is the true, I mean, when you go after like the federal funds for mitigation, that's where I think you can start shedding light on, especially being a coastal town.
So I'm sorry I missed, I don't know what I missed, but just to Press's your comment about how this group meets and so on. I have to say, the fact that we've been talking about these things and doing these things, I mean, anything that's relevant to the board's roles and responsibilities, it seems like you guys are able to work without getting caught up in all of the stuff that the city gets stuck with. Changing ordinances is no small matter. Messing around with building code is no small matter. I mean, that process takes time. When this committee was first formed, I imagined a whole bunch of things besides sea level rise specific stuff. And I don't know when it's appropriate to talk about those things, but I hope this committee doesn't just simply get shelved until there's some relevant piece related to sea level, because I think there are other aspects of your charge or your work, your business that.
Well, this was global warming and sea level rise, and that was the purpose of this. We could expand that.
But global
We didn't-
warming is more than sea level rise.
Oh, yeah.
but I mean,
Well, storm two, I think we're addressing that.
because I mean, we did address the wind loads.
Yeah.
I mean, so we have a handle on the wind loads from the early part of this. And the one piece, it's kind of built into or was accounted for, but the abnormal rain loads, the 24 inches of rain in 24 hours, that piece is still.
Of course, certainly everything else, there's no way to really be sure how that's going to play out on the kind of time scale we're talking.
Yeah, does it tomorrow or not for 20 years? And also, having not had that type of storm here, even though we've been hit around us, we don't really know what the low-lying puddling, because it's so much dependent upon where the storm is. But that's the part that's the piece that I think gives me the most pause.
Right. Well, I mean, we can talk about that problem, maybe offline.
Right.
You know, using the GIS and the data that are in the GIS to do some sort of, you know, modeling of where that water would hang out.
We can certainly do that.
I remember at the beginning of these meetings, you brought some topics up that we said we wanted to touch on in this committee. You want to bring them up again so we refresh us?
I'm not sure I got them all,
Well,
but I mean,
okay, but-
you know, I mean,
Yeah.
when we say global warming, the first thing comes to mind are all the things related to the temperatures changing, regardless of how the winds play out and how that affects, I guess, the demand for electricity through heating and cooling, particularly cooling. Yeah, I don't have a sense of peak demands and costs and all of that. But from some of the stuff I did back at the beginning of the committee, and you can probably look at the notes and I can dig them back up, but my sense was there is going to be a considerable greater number of days above certain benchmark temperatures, which I'm assuming is associated with a higher cooling degree day load, you know, over a greater number of days. And I don't know how that calculates, whether or not that's well within your, you know,
Our peaks in the wintertime,
your peaks in the winter.
the past couple of years.
So is that from heat pumps?
So use the example when, what was the winter storm?
I didn't do it.
No, I'm thinking the winter storm over Christmas.
Elliot,
Anytime they talk about
Yeah,
peaks, they point it.
Elliot was a big one because we got the call from PGM that basically said you have to curtail your
Oh,
usage
yeah.
because they were basically thinking about doing rolling blackouts.
You know, the peaking is very interesting because it all depends on where you are. If you're just south of us, like Virginia down, it's typically summer peak.
So you're saying the costs, the peak cost.
No, electrical demand.
Okay.
If you're north of us, New York north, it's typically winter peaked. The mid-Atlantic is basically
Yeah.
dual peak.
Okay.
And you're nip and tuck depending upon the season and everything else. So at this point, from a cooling load perspective, because we are still winter peaked, not by all that much as I remember. I have to go back and look at the Sergeant Lundy's,
And the population's down. I mean, that population's
but
2,000
still,
people, not 10,000.
right,
But
but
that's
still you
growing.
need to have, they keep the minimum heat on in the house.
Yeah.
Right, so at this point, we have margin in the summer.
Do you have a way of explaining that peak problem in the wintertime? I mean, is it old houses with baseboard heating? I'm not really following.
Resistance heating, heat pumps, geothermal. Everything new that's going in is basically heat pumps or,
You gotta look at it from a region too, because when you look at it from a region base, in the wintertime, when you have that peak demand at like what we were running, it was below sub-zero single digits. That's when and plus you take, and I'm throwing this out there, you take Indian River off, that's where we started to run into the issues, because Indian River had no obligation to run. They had no obligation to turn on at all, because they were not bidding into the capacity market.
So
Yeah, but that's
so
the
the
cost.
supply is dropping in the winter.
Yes, and well, they don't have the transmission lines to support it. That was the whole issue why Indian River had to stay online. If they were to be called upon in a cold start standard.
But how long does it take them to, I know they're online, I mean, they're ready, but how long does it take them to really start producing? any
48
amount?
hours, 48 to 72 hours for a typical coal plant. That's what the heat up cycle is, because you have to
Sharon,
light the
any-
boilers, keep the
So-
boilers
so
low
how,
temp.
how valuable is it to us, really?
I think it's absolutely worthless.
Sharon, do you have any insight on this? I
my
know you
husband
have.
get it start to finish in 20 hours.
What's that?
20 hours.
He works for
He
Indian River.
used to. He works for Delmarva Power now.
Okay.
Hey, that's experience. That's
Put that on the
That's what
record.
he did.
In the control room.
That's from cold, that's a cold
Mhm.
start.
Mhm,
But-
Wow, 'cause
but
I'd always heard it
having-
was days.
Having been run.
mhm. No, I mean, because it didn't run all the time anyway, so you know,
No, I know that, but more than being down for 2 years.
well, that, I don't know. But
So you got to think, we didn't run into any issues last summer, and the majority of the summer, the wind turbine was off, and that wind turbine provides almost 100% capacity for circuit 3 for us.
What's circuit three?
Circuit 3, think about it as the beachside Savannah over towards the yacht club, over into Polytown Village, Polytown Park, New Road. That's all Circuit 3. It's the biggest circuit. But for example, we have the wind turbine, which is absolutely amazing to us. I mean, it just takes the entire load off Circuit 3, but we still ran, like the summer, we ran Circuit 3 and ran no issues with the wind turbine off for service. That's not running in the wintertime. You know, us personally, our peak was in the winter this year so far. But as a cumulative, when you look at PJM as an entire region, their issues are more towards the winter because it's such a drastic peak in the wintertime. You know, the summer remains hot. It's kind of a constant. We still have the obligation, like, for example, a lot of them are on demand response, so they get called on when they think the peaks come in the wintertime or in the summertime. And if they hit those and they curtail their usage, they get a benefit from that. So a lot of the big school districts, BB hospitals on it, if they curtail their usage when they're called upon in the wintertime or in the summertime and in the wintertime, can happen in the winter, they get a benefit to it.
So,
It's the electric.
I mean, I can waste everybody's time. I don't want to waste everybody's time, but, you know, there's a couple things going on here, right? Temperatures are changing. They're warming.
Mhm.
We have a growing number of year-round residents in the area. I don't have the usage data that you have to show how much of an impact that really has. They may mostly be outside of our area. It does seem like there are a lot more lights on over on the beach than there used to be in the middle of the winter. But that's just an indicator. I don't know if it really means anything. But given this thing you're talking about with Indian River, it seems like we're going to get more and more squeezed, particularly in the winter, given what you've said. Maybe this doesn't fall within this committee, but it seems like there's.
We've got major studies going on right now on the electrical side, because we've got DRBA and their electric boats. We've got this.
Okay. All right. So
We're coming up, you know, in the forecasting future of needing to do something to upgrade the substation. So that's all,
in there.
but
That's great.
it's really not directly related, or it's not specifically because of climate change. It will be part of, but as you just said, the growth in the area and the conversion to more heat pumps and geothermal and electric vehicles.
Just to piggyback off that, I think I heard you guys start talking about the single feed, the redundancy feed for the electric. So, and Sharon caught this too. I believe, was it this week that Middletown was taken off?
Yeah,
Yeah,
they
so-
were down for 8 to 10 hours.
So there was an accident on the transmission line that runs from Delmarva to Middletown.
They don't have two.
No, they took an
Really?
outage. Yeah, they're working on a second feed. They took an outage for, I believe it was 10 to 12 hours.
Mhm.
That was an accident that hit a transmission pole.
Why don't they have 2 feeds
Like a
already?
traffic accident or?
Yeah,
or-
traffic accident.
They must have,
They're working on a second.
yeah.
And so are we in the same boat?
Yeah,
Yeah.
something happens between Midway and here.
I just have a question about, and I asked Press before, but we have 69 KVA coming in here. How many 100 horsepower motors is that? I just wanted to.
He asked the wrong person, so
And
I didn't have an answer for him.
I keep getting 92. If you have 92 100 horsepower motors running. So
Hold on, then.
I don't want to know right now, but somebody maybe do the arithmetic and tell me.
No, that's it. That's in the ballpark.
Okay, well,
Nine
that's.
9,000 horsepower is about 5 megawatts. Yeah, that's on the
Okay,
order of
so-
magnitude.
I'm just sitting here in Lewes thinking,
But you can install some
shut
100.
everything off and start up 92 100 horsepower motors. Not that I know
That's
what I
what we
need
used to do.
to do with them, but that doesn't sound, it's not like an awesome amount of power. But
That's what we used to have.
it's,
2 freight train.
Hmm?
That's what we used to have. The interconnection with Delmarva didn't happen until, because we switched from producing our own to having them 2000. I can't remember, early 2000s.
I thought that was just peaking. And
Maybe it
Urgency.
was.
Yeah, I don't
They
think
were-
we-
those were only used as
always
peak
had-
units.
Yeah,
So, but the answer is yes, we could solve our problem by
that
putting
one
in
building was built.
backup generators. However, do you really want, even if you buy class 4 generators, to meet the EPA requirements, do you really want to be burning fossil fuels?
Doing that. I'm not suggesting, I'm just trying to find something I could relate to physically. you
No,
know, 'cause
no,
I
no,
can
you-
stand next to a 100 horsepower motor and I know what that is. And
Yeah, I mean, so
based on what Austin said, I'm now far more thrilled with the wind turbine out there than I was a few minutes ago. But it does seem like a big long problem. I mean, you all have talked about the ferry going to,
Electric boats.
yeah, battery powers. Seems like need some more lines in here or something. You know?
Yeah.
More lines, not same lines twice as big.
right, and that's actually what the big issue is from a reliability perspective, redundancy. You don't want to put a second line in next to your current line,
You know?
because it's the same travel path, same.
Right, I'm back to my brother Senator here saying, what about electric vehicles?
So I have the solution, just put a windmill right on top of the ferry station.
There we go.
Everything will be good. Yeah. I'm just teasing.
It's can't overlook it. I mean, even if you look at the wastewater treatment plant site, I know that it will get backlash to no end, but that wind turbine when running provides a tremendous, and it's a 2 megawatt windmill, and it really does almost take the entire load off.
We make them a lot bigger now.
Yeah,
State park.
I heard this one this
With the
morning,
restaurant on the
that
top.
another thing that's being blamed on is the turbulence for air traffic. Evidently, the turbulence has been jumping up quickly, and they're saying that the winds are being impacted by it.
You're saying global warming related changes in the atmosphere?
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 So air
Much less-
traffic, there's a
Much
lot more.
instability.
Yeah.
With no visibility,
Yeah. it's no
because it
visibility.
doesn't even show up on the radars.
Yeah.
We had a tornado, we had a near miss tornado the other, what was it, 2 weeks ago? Easter, wasn't it Easter?
Yeah.
Sunday?
It was
Maybe it was before that.
No, it was the week before Easter.
Okay.
Yeah, the week before Easter, yeah.
Well, I mean, bring your points up. And we can all talk by email for a while. Sure. There's issues and there's, as we progress with this new information, I think we'll meet occasionally to bring you up to speed. And when the city gets their act together, then we'll meet again on that as that goes forward. So,
yeah, I think, from a mitigation standpoint, the electricity vulnerability is something I'm very concerned about. That we are so reliant on outside sources and how much solar might help if people have rooftop solar. Can it feed into our grid, or can we do something about energy storage, battery storage?
But, and we had gone out for bids twice and we have evaluated, and we've kind of put the batteries on hold right now. Hopefully things stabilize in the market, but we were trying to solve two problems, both reliability and peaking demands. And we quickly came to the conclusion from a financial perspective that hybrid doesn't work, because you're either so overbuilding the battery to get the reliability, or you're undersizing the battery and you only get like an hour out of, or, less than an hour out of it for the town. So, we're still wrestling with those things, but like I said, that's part of what we're doing on the electrical side, totally independent from mitigation, climate change. But it will take those into account.
Right, right.
But there are bigger reasons to do those things.
And that's why when you take a step back and you look at what's going on around you, you have the push from DENREC to move towards zero emissions by 2035 when it comes to vehicles. And you have the push for net metering, but then you have to sit on the backside from a utility standpoint and see, is this realistic? And with Indian River coming offline, and that was a complete regulatory debacle, trying to handle that situation and having all these transmission lines built to basically, for all intents and purposes, get the same energy using the exact same methodology, i.e. fossil fuels
Just
from
from-
another location.
From over on the mainland.
Correct. And so then you start to unpack, how realistic are these means and methods? We're talking about AMI, and AMI allows you to look into and see what of your infrastructure is overloaded beyond us going and doing thermal studies of our transformers to see if they're overloaded. But our communication with Delmarva is pretty good through the DMEC level, even through our level, because if it wasn't for Delmarva Power, we wouldn't even know that they'd be taking us offline for the Old Orchard realignment, because DelDOT hasn't said a single word to us, and it's a DelDOT project. So,
And one of the things I think, there's been several recent industry journal articles pointing out some of the downsides. And this is not anti, folks. But pointing out the downsides of battery hydrogen, and that everyone is jumping into that bandwagon. What they was pointing out is that doing that on its own will actually make the environmental consequences worse. Because unless it's tied into solar, wind,
Right.
nuclear, hydro projects, all you're doing then is draining when you need the power from solar during the peaks to charge the batteries, and then forcing gas plants or coal plants to run. So this wasn't anti-battery or hydrogen. It was saying that the plans that are being developed right now, they're so one-sided and no one's looking at the negative consequences.
Oh,
So
where they work is if you like solar or wind or whatever, you generate more than you're using,
right,
convert it to hydrogen, and then you
But-
can use that.
but there's an awful lot of these battery projects,
Mhm.
and they were specifically talking about like some of the cities like New York, some that are putting in these massive battery banks. And that when they've done studies on them, those battery banks, when they come online,
You have hydrogen battery banks? you talking about
battery banks, and will actually be more polluting than less polluting until they can, unless we do something on the generation side.
Right, right. Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense.
It was somewhat shocking. I knew of the tide, but I did not realize it was as severe with the push.
A question about AMI. I think I might have brought this up earlier, but will this allow BPW to communicate with the homeowner? I mean, for instance, when I was in Delaware Electric Cooperative, they had this,
beat the
Thing.
peak.
yeah.
Mm.
And a red light flashed when it was a peak time. And this is a good time to conserve. I'm not going to run my dishwasher now. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. And I remember we got rebates from when that program started. We got money back at the end of the year because we had prevented them from having to go out and buy power from other sources.
So you have the ability to do it. It's a la carte as much as what you want. You can go with the vanilla or you can go with the Neapolitan. You have the ability to go in, you can opt into a program that allows the utility to change thermostats so that when you leave the house, you can, when that beat the peak comes on, they could cut back, and instead of being 68, they could put it to 70 in the summertime. You can make it as complex as what you want, but I think with the changing of the electric industry and the electric rates, you're going to start to see more of a push towards time of use, and time of use is going to shift that risk more onto the customer. Because what happens is, if you were to use the beat the peak and you decide that you were going to do it, but somebody else didn't decide they were going to do it, it basically nets itself out. In time of use, it's saying that, hey, just so you know, at 4 o'clock, the rates are going to be higher because that demand is going to be so great. And a lot of that comes down to, again, solar is another big piece to this, because solar is great when the sun's out.
Day.
When the sun goes in, you're shifting all of that responsibility to, for example, everybody else on the system, because you're instantaneous. If you're drawing 1,000, like if you're producing 1,000 kWh and you're using it, and then you shut off, then we instantly have to provide you 1,000.
We already use that for large users. That's how they pay. But they're billed differently than.
And most
but
people don't
what does
realize.
that mean for Lewis? I mean, what are you gonna do for a homeowner in Lewis or a business owner?
That's these guys right here. So we're working with UFS now to start a cost of service study. I can tell you that from the top down, meaning when you look at DMEC and DMEC looks at their power suppliers, there's a large discussion and push towards time of use rates. So if DMEC implements time of use, that means BPW is buying at time of use, meaning we would then ask, just like Beat the Peak is, if your rates don't support it, we would then come to you and say, please conserve energy in this time frame. Or the BPW changes their rates and says, we're implementing time of use because we're being billed time of use.
But
Which then,
yeah, and one step above that is, we did authorize joining DMAC and AMP to install AMI. Now, they still have to go for the funding.
Mhm.
But so the first step is to get AMI in. And then you can look at all the add-ons. But, so we've made the first step there.
So, but if you're putting in a new house with an electric meter now, can you measure that? Can you measure time of use or not?
no, because you're only doing one reading. I mean, you'd have to physically go out there and read every single day. And you'd only be reading one snapshot of a 24-hour day instead of like 15-minute intervals.
You have no idea when the
When it occurred.
was burned.
Mhm.
We can do it at the master station, but not at the individual homeowners. So installing AMI allows us the option of going to time of use, and the industry has finally appears to maybe be getting their act together about the interconnectivity. Because the problem is right now is that if you have an AMI, whoever your AMI vendor is, uses different protocols. They all use different protocols. And so backfeeding to thermostats, your EV chargers, things like that requires another special module. And they're trying to get around that now. Tesla is just announced a new charger that will get its signal from the internet. And then the utilities can upload their AMI data because it's all on the internet anyway. And you can cross connect them to allow the EV charges to be turned on and off during peaks. But it's like herding cats at this point.
Right.
So there's nothing that BPW could do now.
Yeah.
that would be productive.
No, unfortunately not.
So I'm
However, I'm going to the engineering conference in 2 weeks, and that is one of the big topics. So I will let you know.
So I'm intrigued by Austin's description of the awesomeness of the wind turbine out at UD. And sitting here and thinking about the way, the challenges, as I understand it, it seems like there's an opportunity to engage not only the grant writing expertise of the university, but to look at the technical expertise of the university. And I know long ago, there was a professor named Willett Kempton who was looking at wind power, coming up with some interesting ways of using electric, the batteries in electric cars to be able to provide electricity back to the grid, something called vehicle to grid. Given the conversation we just had about batteries, given the problem of when the sun shines versus when the energy demand is peaking, and I think you guys have said it's more in the afternoon than it is in the middle of the day when the sun is shining.
Mhm.
So you just said there's a conversion you have to do in terms of where that energy is coming from. Just having spent enough time here, my sense is, at least in the summertime, the wind doesn't blow very hard in the middle of the day. It does pick up in the margins, in the mornings and in the afternoons. And, I just drew this little curve, and it looks like the curves sort of cancel each other out between wind and solar.
I'm surprised in the afternoons, because I know sitting on the beach at 4 o'clock, it usually gets real calm.
Yeah.
That's when you go down there and it's really nice. And
As a sailor, the wind is blowing offshore.
Mhm.
It's blowing
Oh.
over the buildings. If you're down on the beach, you're
Okay.
in a little shadow. The wind
You've also had a couple of beers by then.
yeah, a couple of beers, you feel much more relaxed.
That's probably. So,
What
but
are
the-
you
but
impugning
the-
here?
My general understanding is
That's
the
where we
wind
met on the
changes
beach.
direction, right?
Drinking
It
beer.
blows one way in the morning and during the day, but it tends to sort of drop off in the middle of the day. In the afternoon, at least it always used to, maybe it doesn't anymore. It would always turn and go southwest and blow out to the water. So you'd have to be out in the water before you feel it. Now, if you've got a wind turbine somewhere around here, that's picking it up. I'm sure there's a way of checking that out, looking at the wind data that they're collecting.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's a very short duration, because that has to do with the sun getting low and the temperature shifting and the wind directions picking up. I mean, because there's always been, for sailors, the onshore, offshore wind at sunrise and sunset.
And it may just
And
be
mostly
that it's just
sunset.
those moments. I don't know.
Yeah.
I've never really paid attention.
Which is why, the big pushes with offshore wind, which we won't even go into now, but it is much, much more reliable than onshore wind and higher power density.
To the point that Austin made about, the turbine and maybe other locations where we might put them. I think, is it Atlantic City? Don't they have one sitting on shore?
I don't know.
Somewhere on the Jersey shoreline. I don't remember where it is. I think it might be Atlantic City. They actually have a wind turbine that's sitting in about the kind of position.
I mean,
that
a
you're in.
large one like we have.
I mean, I don't know if it's as
Yeah,
big or if
yeah,
it's bigger, but
yeah,
it's that
yeah.
kind of a.
Well, this is kind of small now, I guess, in
Right.
present
So,
terms.
and
Yeah.
The
Oh,
Atlantic
this is a
City one, I
big-
think, is actually older. It may be
The
even a
new ones
little
are
smaller. I don't know.
13.7 megawatts. Oh, my.
What's this one?
1.7,
Yeah.
1.9.
Yeah,
Well, there's a second or third one.
at the
out
wastewater treatment.
What's that?
There you go. It's the wastewater treatment plant at Atlantic City. Thank you.
There's 5 of them.
Oh, there was only one of them a few years ago.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
They must be small ones though, right?
380-foot turbines, 7.5 megawatts.
There you go.
They're a little bit,
No, that's gotta be total.
Combined.
So,
Yeah.
combined.
they're a little bit smaller than, a little bit smaller. This one's 2 megawatts, so he's forever. You put
About
5.
two or three more.
Yeah, right.
Well, but remember, this was a gift from Blue Water. Who was it that?
I think it was Blue Water was getting involved, or the university was getting involved.
Yeah, because this was part of their foyer, 10 years ago, to try to put the offshore wind in, was to donate one to the university for studies and, so.
Anyway, I mean,
Well, it seemed to work.
Yeah. But they're not in business anymore, are they?
Yeah,
Well, how much would is something like that?
Is that? I mean,
$10 million or?
I don't know how it works now, but my sense is
I don't know.
the returns that you get from the electricity, at least when I looked at this 15, 20 years ago at this scale, looking at community-based wind powered facilities in the Midwest, you could pay them off in a matter of like 10 years. You run a lot longer than that. I mean, sure, they need maintenance, but all the financial analysis that they put together showed that you should be kind of counting money for probably the last half of the lifetime of the plant.
The tough part is that no matter where you are, like if you look at where that plant is in Atlantic City, there's nothing around it.
Right.
Which is the complexity of Lewis, because no matter where you put it, I know when they put that one in, it got
Oh,
a lot
yeah,
of
yeah,
objection.
people could hear it. And
Oh, I can hear it. I can hear it, absolutely.
it's funny, depending on which way things are going.
Yeah.
I've been right under it and not heard it.
No.
And then
It's all about the wind
sometimes
direction.
I'll hear it at the house, yeah.
It's all about the wind direction.
Do we have anything else? I know this has been great. I think,
I have just one
Yeah.
question from earlier. Mark has brought up on a couple of occasions, you get high water flooding and saltwater intrusion and so the quick solution was to shut off the pumping from the beach area or whatever. And I guess I just think that you have this data, where else would you pump? Do you have a scenario about, okay, we're going to shut the beach off. Where else would you be shutting off? Next, and next, and next.
Well, and it could be that you're not shutting the beach off, you're shutting off the area around Canary Creek. I mean, so it's all dependent upon, and I'm a little hypersensitive to that, I think, as both you gentlemen understand, is that it's not a beach town issue.
I understand.
Yeah, so,
Well, I
but-
guess I'm just suggesting that you kind of think that through.
Well, I'm gonna pile on that. I see a copy of something referring to the wastewater treatment facility planning process.
we can't get into that. That's not on the agenda for this meeting.
I don't
Okay.
want to.
Yeah.
But I just want to reference something that was brought up and an image that I have carrying around in my head of the option one additional expansion tank, the 3 million gallon tank that you guys had some visualizations of.
6 times, going from 500,000 to 6.
Right.
To
To
3.
Tom, to Bob's question just now. Does it, if option 3 or something where we're removing the plant happens, is there any value in having some sort of storage there to hold, if you ever do shut off parts of the system, a place where you can sort of hold things, as an intermediate storage platform, you've got it placed there. We don't need to spend any time on this, but it just came up in my mind as Bob was talking. Yeah.
Could we have another mitigation planning committee meeting to talk about the wastewater
Well,
treatment?
that's why we have the workshops, though. The public should be there and should be asking questions. To have special meetings, I think, is unfair.
Ah.
Because,
yeah, I mean,
I was
we're doing it
disappointed-
every month.
disappointed
and
that
then
you guys were there, but I think you're the majority of the people.
Yeah,
were
right.
there.
we did have a mitigation team meeting. That's what
Yeah.
was there.
Yeah,
I wanted to say that I didn't speak about all my concerns at those meetings, thinking that there was going to be
there's another
a
meeting.
meeting here to talk about that.
We can't
I didn't realize that.
get into, that's a pretty touchy subject, and to have it not on the
Okay.
agenda and discussing it, I think unless it directly relates to our charge, I'd be, Reluctant to-
I'll bring up my concerns at the next public meeting then. I
you
didn't
can,
realize.
Now-
you can provide them to us at any
Yeah.
time.
Okay,
I mean, that's
He
why
can
we
provide
did,
them, he can provide them to us to think about. but-
yes, okay.
I mean, that's why we did the walk down of the wastewater treatment plant. And, we're soliciting feedback on the things related to mitigation with the wastewater treatment plant. The drying beds, the those type of things, wind loading, et cetera.
Press, I want to second something you just said,
Sure.
which is, I continue to be disappointed by the low number of people that are showing up for what you guys yourselves have characterized as maybe the most important
Yeah.
decision that you're going to be making. And I don't know what,
And we advertised the hell out of it. It was on Zoom.
It was in the paper.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
But it's been,
I think
mean-
when people realize how it may affect their pocketbooks, they may very well come in droves.
How do you get them to realize that?
Well, I think it starts with having numbers that they can relate to.
So we technically, we did that. So the first meeting, it wasn't in the great amount of detail, but we put a slide in there that showed, looking at option one, the day that option goes into effect and you have to service the debt and the operations, that person can look at their wastewater portion of their bill and say, that's going to be 0 to 15% of an impact. So you basically take whatever your number is times 1.15, and that's what the impact.
And the other
I
thing
missed
is, we,
that meeting.
And no, you're good. That's
the only thing, if you start getting into that, I mean, there's been suggestion that we do a pro forma on the issues. Well, we're in the concept stage. We're not even in the planning stage. I mean, this is the concept stage. And start throwing numbers out. People will remember those. Right or wrong, I don't think we have enough detailed information over and above what's already been disclosed to give the public. So that's the quandary we have. That can come back and bite you big time. As soon as somebody has, say, you said it was going to be this amount, now it's 2% more, and you guys were lying to us.
but on the attendance, this was the 5th meeting, right? This last week.
Mhm.
The first 3 meetings, we had like between 60 and 100 people. And then the 4th meeting, we dropped down to
20,
30.
20, 30 maybe.
and they'll all
And
be back.
then
when you say-
last week, we were down to 14. And we exclude the people we're paying to be there. So,
Right.
so you guys would include it, it's the public.
But you have more or less telegraphed what you're gonna do. I mean, whether you believe that or not. You've told the public what you're gonna do, and here are our options, and we're narrowing them. These are the ones we're talking about. And,
But if
they
there was
may or
public,
may not be mad, but
but if there's public opposition, you thought that they would have come out in the good old days.
Well, again, we shouldn't
Anyway.
be getting
Yeah.
into this because it is a touchy subject. And
I have a
People found
question.
out that we were talking about that and not what we're
I have a question
to
about
be
this.
more touchy. Yes.
Just to understand what these elevations are about here. In the study that
She-
she-
HD.
they talk about the recommended value that we should be using for design flood elevations. And the estimated 2050, 100-year design flood is supposed to be 9.39 feet. And I look at the numbers here.
Oh, we accepted that. We accepted that as a.
Oh, yeah.
In the first place, this is incorrect. Adding that to the elevation is incorrect. That's subsidence. That's a dropping of the land below the elevation. So this number is off by, a few inches is all. What my question is where did we get the 12.64, the 10.64, the 11.64, those numbers? Why aren't they all the same elevation that we should be shooting for based on
Future.
this elevation?
Those are based on the AE class. I think that's what I'm taking.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Correct.
See, if the basically 87, we're saying, 7 foot of flooding elevation.
Okay, so our recommendation of a flood, of a value that we should have for flood doesn't go across the board for
Yeah,
everything.
because things that are presently like a foot below, foot above something else, we don't have to raise them.
I just wanted to
If you look
clarify that.
at the FEMA flood analysis. And I know Tom and I don't remember if you looked at it when we were dealing with the planning commission. It's a very heavy document with a lot of statistical stuff. But basically, they do a bunch of modeling to determine if a storm came into this area, how the water would rise relative to things like Roosevelt Inlet, the opening that it provides, and the
Okay.
ability it allows for water to spread from there, where the lowest parts of the landscape, what's exposed to wind, I don't know what else I'm missing here, but there's a funny shaped map
Yeah.
that distinguishes different elevations that would be achieved in a storm setting, and that's why you get these
Okay.
A7,
I
A8,
see.
A9. I think that's why you have these different.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Correct.
the most blatant example of that is look at the wastewater treatment plant. It's AE6, AE7. It's the same piece of land. But
Yeah.
part of it is by the FEMA maps floodable to 6 feet, and part of it's floodable to 7 feet.
Okay.
It's not completely
Well, but
logical.
but the other part of it is also the topography of the land surface.
Yeah, the land's probably raising up a little bit. Yeah.
It's not, we're not dealing with a, billiard table here.
Yeah.
We're dealing with all sorts
I
of-
just was taking a number from NAV 88.0. You had 12 feet, and that's what the flood elevation is.
That
So
would be
you
a
deal with that.
that'd be a constant bathtub, yeah, but that's not,
Okay.
the models are more
Okay.
dynamic.
Yeah, I
than
saw
that.
some of that type of information in the GMB report that was done on the flooding out on the peninsula. And everything. So, okay, I get you now. Thank you.
All right, if there's nothing else, do I have a motion to adjourn? Please.
I'll make such a motion, but I would like to note that the brownies have been excellent.
Put that in there.
We'll have to have one before I can.
All in favor?
Thank you.
I'll pass this up to Chris.